everybody.
Morning.
I'm wearing Richie's hoodie this morning.
I'm wearing Richie's hoodie too.
We are Richie's hoodie twins.
Yes.
Pretty good.
That's right.
I hope this week's been okay for people. Some people will have started school. Some people will have gone back to work if they work in schools. Hopefully, if you went back to school or you started school, you got a nice bar of chocolate as a gift from us to make you smile and say, well done for doing it. Well done, all the grown-ups. Well done, people who cried as they sent off their children back to school, and well done for everyone who had to juggle all the newness of it all.
It's a tough transition, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got a little visitor in the background. If I move to the side, Lucy is colouring.
Give us a wave.
She refused to move, so
She's busy.
So she's busy colouring, so we're having to do it with her in the background. So that little scribbling sound is just adding to the moment. So in about 2 weeks' time, the living room is 3 years old, and we like to do something usually where we celebrate and kind of look back a little bit over the year about the kind of stuff that has gone on. Obviously, this year's been quite different with lockdown and everything like that, but we'd still really like to be able to, as part of what we do in the morning, be able to showcase, I suppose, some different thoughts from people about what the living room has meant to them this year. So if you've got something that you want to be able to share, we're thinking maybe 1 or 2 minutes long, record us a little video thing and send it through to us, because we'd love to be able to feature what different people have got to say and be able to kind of showcase that as part of it, because at the end of the day we want what we're doing to be able to make a difference, and it's really nice to be able to hear how encouraging people have found the stuff that we've done. So we'll do that. Oh, got a little visitor. She's back.
Hello, she's even bought a chair to sit on to be in it.
Cool. Actually, Lucy features in one of the things we're doing this morning. So we're going to do a couple of simple things this morning. After this, we're going to have a little story, which you'll tell us about in a moment. But then I'll talk, and we've got a song as well.
You haven't said about the picnic.
Oh, no. Quickly. Do you want me to do that? The other thing we're doing on the 20th of September, so on our 3rd birthday, is we want to be able to do something where we can get together, but obviously we need to play by the rules, social distancing, and making sure that we're doing it properly. Lucy's happy about it. But we want to be able to do something where we can get together. We know that not everyone's going to feel comfortable to do that, so if you're not happy to do that, that's absolutely fine. But for those of you who are, we're going to meet at Whittons Park at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, not
Sunday
in the evening.
the 20th.
Sunday the 20th for a picnic. So if the weather's bad, we'll kind of make alternative arrangements at the time. But that's what we'd like to do to celebrate. So we'll do the little thing in the morning online, and then we'll meet at 12.
Okay, I think Lucy's got some recipe ideas from the Good Food magazine.
Okay, that's
good. So, you know, we'll bring your own picnic, bring your own blanket, and we'll spread them out.
Bring your own burgers.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks for that.
Thank you, Liz.
Okay,
That's
enough
brilliant.
now. So, first of all, as well, I just want to apologise for the confusion of the Bring Me a Thing Me game. It is a very fun game. Last time I said, give us a thumbs up if you want to play. Nobody, well, maybe one person gave us a thumbs up, so we cancelled it, and then people tried to play the game, and I'm really sorry. Today, we are actually playing Bring Me a Thing Me at 11:30. The Zoom link is out. If you haven't got the Zoom link, get in touch. You can have the Zoom link. We'd love anybody to join us. You're all welcome to join us. So that would be great. And also, I'm just going to do a little transition now into a lovely story that we read early on in lockdown called The Invisible String. And we thought it might be worth just revisiting it now that everyone is having to go back to school, because the invisible string is now a bit of a different string, isn't it? We're now missing our families, aren't we, while we're going back to doing what we're doing, and I missed you. So let's have a listen to The Invisible String.
Morning, everybody.
We're going to read a story together, and it's called The Invisible String by Patrice Karst. It is an absolutely beautiful book, and it is so useful at this time because everybody's missing people, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's lots of people we can't see.
Yeah, but there is an invisible string that connects to each other.
Is there?
Yes.
Shall we find out about it?
Yeah.
The Invisible String. And it's dedicated to the children of the world and the magic of their strings. Lisa and Jeremy, the twins, were asleep
one calm and quiet night. Suddenly it began to rain very hard. Thunder rumbled until it got so loud that it woke them up. "Mummy, Mummy," they cried out as they ran to her. "Don't worry, you two. It's just the storm making all that noise. Go back to bed." "We want to stay close to you," said Jeremy. "We're scared." Mum said, "You know we're always together, no matter what." "But how can we be together when you're out here and we're in bed?" said Lisa. Mum held something right in front of them and said, "This is how." Rubbing their sleepy eyes, the twins came closer to see what Mum was holding. I was about your age when my mummy first told me about the invisible string. "I don't see a string," said Jeremy. "You don't need to see the invisible string. People who love each other are always connected by a very special string made of love." "But if you can't see it, how do you know it's there?" said Lisa. "Even though you can't see it with your eyes, you can feel it with your heart and know that you are always connected to everyone you love." That's so nice to know now, isn't it?
Yep.
"When you're at school and you miss me, your love travels all the way along the string until I feel it tug on my heart. And when you tug it right back, we feel it in our hearts," said Jeremy. "Does Jasper the cat have an invisible string?" Lisa asked. "She sure does," said Mum. "And best friends like me and Lucy?" asked Lisa. "She's called Lucy."
Yeah.
"Like you."
It's got the same spelling my name.
"That's true. Best friends too. How far can the string reach?" "Anywhere and everywhere," Mum said. "Would it reach me even if I were a submarine captain deep in the ocean?" asked Jeremy. "Yes," said Mum. "Even there." "Or a mountain climber?" "Even there." "A dancer in France?" "What's this?"
Eiffel Tower.
"Even there." "A jungle explorer?" "Even there." "How about an astronaut out in space?" "Yes, even there." Then Jeremy quietly asked, "Can my string reach all the way to Uncle Brian in heaven?" "Yes, even there." Well, that's nice to know. "Does the string go away when you're mad at us?" "Never," said Mum. "Love is stronger than anger, and as long as love is in your heart, the string will always be there." "Even when you get older and can't agree about things like what movie we want to see, or what game to play in the back seat, or what time to go to bed? Oh, that's right, you two should be in bed." And with that, they all laughed as Mum chased the twins back to their beds. Within a few minutes, they were asleep, even though the storm was still making the same loud noises outside. As they slept, they started dreaming of all the invisible strings they have, and all the strings their friends have, and their friends have, until everyone in the world was connected by invisible strings. And from deep inside, they now could clearly see no one is ever alone. Oh, that is such a lovely story, isn't it?
Yes.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes.
What did you like about it?
Well, I loved about the heart on the front. And the invisible string.
I love the way that when you love someone, you're always connected to them. Even if you can't cuddle them at the minute, even if you can only wave through a window or even just send them a message or FaceTime. If you love someone, you're always connected by an invisible string. Hope you enjoyed that story. We did.
Bye.
that you've prepared for me in the presence of my enemies. It's your body and the blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. There's a table that you've prepared for me in the presence of my enemies. It's your body and the blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. And I believe you've overcome, and I will lift my song of praise for what you've done. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. In the valley, I know that you're with me, and surely your goodness and your mercy follow me. My weapons are praise and thanksgiving. This is how I fight my battles. And I believe you've overcome, and I will lift my song of praise for what you've done. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Surround us, Jesus. I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles.
This is how I fight my battles. This is how it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Oh, even when we feel like we're surrounded, it's really you wrapping us up in your arms. It's really you wrapping us up in your arms.
We've spent the last few weeks looking at this whole idea of the importance of questioning and curiosity. Last week we kind of moved that on and looked about how the ethic of loving people and being loved to people sometimes needs to lead to a challenge to our belief system and maybe the things we've been taught or inherited as we've grown up. I want to kind of push us on a bit further again today to think about this whole idea of, I suppose, how do we develop, how do we migrate our thinking, and how do we change the way that we think? It can be an uncomfortable process, but as I kind of begin to consider this kind of stuff, the question that really comes up to me is there any room for change in the way that you think about God? A few weeks ago, we finished running the character course, which was an 8-week course we did with a load of people from the living room. We had a really good time discussing loads of different topics. But during one of those topics, they looked at this, Roger, the guy who leads it through, looked at this two ways that people think. He talked about people either having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Obviously, a fixed mindset is that you know what you think and that's enough. You don't need to push it any further. Whereas a growth mindset is all about this idea that we're constantly moving, developing, thinking and questioning stuff and growing in the way that we think. When I think about God and faith, it's really easy to default to a fixed mindset. You take the theology, maybe it's interpretation of the Bible, the spiritual stance that you've inherited or been taught. And in some ways we can take that information and we can decide that we're going to hold true to that forever, that those things are what you, the foundation blocks of what you've built your faith and your understanding of God on. So it doesn't need to change. And in effect, it's almost like we've turned round and we've put that set of beliefs and our faith through a laminator in order to protect it and keep it kind of fresh and so that it can't be spoilt or can't be changed. And I get why people do that, because sometimes we feel like this foundation is the core of everything that we believe, and it can't change because that's just the truth and the way that it needs to work. But as I think about these last few weeks, and as we've been talking about questioning and this whole idea of change, when we each consider our own personal standpoint, where do we stand on that? Do you feel like you have a fixed mindset, or is there any room for change in the way that you think about God? When we sit, I said before, it's quite an uncomfortable, can be quite an uncomfortable journey to go on at times. But when you sit and think about that kind of stuff, it can be easy to, I suppose, dismiss it and say it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary to change. But we've got to understand that what we have now in our current society and the way things work for us now, even just within the Christian world, what we have now in terms of things like how we view God, the Bible, humanity. It's not how it always was. What we have now isn't been this laminated set of rules that have existed throughout the whole of time. And actually, it doesn't seem to particularly resemble how it worked in Jesus' time. And that's because the reality is the world changes, people change, understanding develops, humanity develops in their way of thinking. And if we were to do something like compare our world now, and especially the Christian standpoint, Christian perspective now to medieval times, we'd see quite a dramatic difference. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I've been reading, I read a book by Brian McLaren called A New Kind of Christian, which is looking at these kind of things in essence. He tells this story in this book about how a guy was taking a lecture to a load of students, and he was talking about this very subject of how people's viewpoints change over time. And as a bit of an experiment, he decides to take 2 students from the class, pick them out and say, okay, let's imagine that you 2 were sent back to medieval times. What would medieval Christians make of you? And this is what he says. Nobody could possibly believe that you could be Christians. Of course, first, there would be the obvious cultural issues. For example, even a medieval prostitute wouldn't have been seen in public dressed like you. And your fine haircut would have made people either laugh at you or fear you were a witch of some sort. He goes on to say, but on a deeper level, if you told them you didn't believe in the Pope and you didn't accept that kings ruled by divine right, and you didn't believe that God created a universe consisting of concentric spheres of ascending perfection, and if you let it slip that you agreed with Copernicus that the earth rotated around the sun, you would surely be tried as heretics and perhaps burned at the stake. Goes on to say this. Now take a moment and let this really sink in. To the Christian culture of medieval Europe, none of you today could be considered real Christians. True, you might say that you believe in Jesus and that you follow the Bible, but that would sound like nonsense to them if at the same time you denied what to them was essential for any reasonable person to accept, the medieval worldview, which was the context for their faith. When I read that, it really made me think. It was a real kind of point of challenge for me because I never look at it like that. I never look at the idea of if we jump back in time, what would people think of what we believe now? And when we do take some time to think about that, the idea that we could be, I suppose, let me just find it. I've lost where I'm in my notes. Just bear with me. Yeah, the idea that we could ever be labelled as heretics or burnt at the stake for what we currently believe now to be the foundations of everything to do with believing in God seems completely ridiculous. But the reason that I suppose all of this happens is because things change over time. Humanity and understanding has evolved and perspectives have shifted. And what we now see in a lot of the ways that Christians think, it makes sense in the world that we live in. But here's the big question that I want us to think about today, and it's this. Do you ever think there will need to be a spiritual migration, a shift, or a change in the future? When you think about the world that we live in, the way everything works, the way we've begun to change and understand humans, people, maybe experiences of God have shifted. We've begun to understand what it's like to be different people, different cultures, different races. Do you ever think there will need to be another shift in the future? And the question to consider in that is, why did it happen before? Why did there need to be a shift from medieval times to where we are now? And I suppose the reality is it's because sometimes we get stuck. We get stuck in a mode of thinking, that laminated set of beliefs, that laminated kind of set of rules that we've built everything on might actually begin to get outdated and might not particularly work for the way the world works. And that will have been what happened before, that as people began to question the medieval way of thinking, the perspectives of stuff, and they began to understand more about the world, about science, about psychology, about I suppose more understanding about culture, about what was going on in Bible times and the difference between the world then and the world now. A shift was needed in order for it to migrate into a kind of new way of thinking. And what we've got to understand is our world now is different. Society is different. Our world is changing. And one of the things we've got to understand in the West is that predominantly we live in a post-Christian culture. The good news that we often talk about to do with being a Christian and the message of Jesus isn't necessarily brand new news for everyone. And that demands a change in itself. You can't just kind of go into situations thinking, well, I'll just tell people about Jesus and then they'll all want to sign up to it. The reality is the world that we live in now is some people know about Jesus, know about God, know about the story. Maybe they've even experienced it, but they've chosen for many, many different reasons that it's not for them. Maybe they've snubbed it or rejected it or been hurt and don't really know what to do with it. So they've moved on, and what we would say is the answer didn't really work for them. So that demands a shift in our way of thinking and our way of communicating and relating to people, because it's not as simple as, well, I'll just tell them about Jesus and then they'll want to be like me. It doesn't really work like that in the same way. I suppose as I think about all of this stuff, think about how do we begin to push in a new direction. I kind of think to myself, what would it look like to take the core of who God is and what he desires for humanity and take that message forward in a new way? So it then becomes not a message that's built around people being wrong, or that focuses on anger or disappointment or judgment from God, but instead changes the narrative a bit. I've got to be honest with you, I've struggled for years with this concept that in order to get people to become a Christian, the main tactic is we make them feel bad about themselves. Now, the reason that's probably worked is because the stories we always hear of transformation of lives is often around people, the ones we champion most is people whose lives have been spiraling out of control, that they got caught up in this, that and everything else and went on this really wayward path, and then they saw the light and came back and their life was transformed and changed. Those stories are amazing. But the problem is when you meet someone who's not a Christian and they are a truly wonderful and amazing person, the idea that you try and make them feel bad for not following God is a really strange tactic. And actually it doesn't really work, because the idea of them needing to change their lives, they might be quite happy with who they are. And as I've sat with that kind of stuff more and more and thought, well, man, what do we do? Actually, I think the reason I don't feel comfortable with it is because I don't really think at the core of God what it is all about is people being wrong, or God's anger, or God's disappointment or judgment of people. I feel like we've latched onto that, and I don't think that's a helpful strategy. So when we think about doing stuff in a new way, we're talking about a message of love, of hope, of purpose, of connection, healing, restoration, compassion, these kind of things that suddenly, to me, really reflect who God is. That feels way more in tune with who I know God to be. But to do that, to move into a new direction, I suppose we need to be prepared to destroy the stereotypes of what people assume about God, and maybe what people have begun to assume about Christians. Got to destroy those kind of things and, I suppose, truly become love to all people. And that stuff demands what we're talking about. It demands this spiritual migration, this shift, this change, this development in the way that we think, in order to truly and authentically take a message of love out to people. So for me, to put it simply, it's all about allowing the nature of God, so the one who is love, to really show through us in the things that we do, the things that we say, the way we treat people, and I suppose the way we approach our world and the things that we do within that world. And that affects everything. It affects everything. It can be so easy to get stuck in a way of thinking, and sometimes it's a lot harder work to really push and really cause yourself to ask questions and think about stuff. But I really hope as we look at these kind of topics that you'll take the opportunity to really go on a journey and think for yourself about how you feel about this stuff, and ultimately take that to God and see what kind of journey you can go on with him. So let's pray. Father God, thank you that you are interested in helping us to grow and helping us to develop. And as we go on this journey together, I pray that you would really highlight the stuff that maybe we've got stuck in, or maybe stuff that we've really fixed our mindset down on, that maybe you want to challenge and change. God, I pray that you'd speak to each of us and that you'd help us to grow. And you'd help us ultimately to be people who really show your very nature in all the things that we do. So be close to us, be with us. Amen. So that's all for this week. Thanks for listening. I think we've got a couple of fairly exciting things coming up over the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. And if you need anything, please get in touch, because we love you and we're here for you. So have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.